Hi, folks. Hope you are okay. We got another stream. It's called the New Testament Documents and the Historicity of the Resurrection. And we're looking at an article by Sam Shimon. I don't agree with his theology. I'll just be 1 second. Yeah, so we'll look at the article. You get the article here. Excuse me. It's on this site here, but you can get the article here. Just Google the New Testament document, The History of the Resurrection by Sam Shimon. Like I said, I don't agree with Sam Shimon's theology and the way he conducts himself sometimes, but this article is very helpful. It says, the historicity of the resurrection is firmly rooted in the reliability of the New Testament documents. If it becomes shown that the New Testament documents are unreliable, then the case for the resurrection goes out of the window. If it can be demonstrated that the New Testament documents are historically accurate and were written down during the lifetime of the eyewitnesses to the life of the resurrection of Jesus, then the truth claim of Christianity is affirmed. External evidence would include the number and dating of available New Testament manuscripts, as well as archaeological evidence that serves to affirm or debunk the early composition of the New Testament. So let's see if we can get this a bit bigger. Is that a lot better? Yeah, so that's a lot better. Okay. We have today in our possession 5,300 non-Greek manuscripts of the New Testament, another 10,000 Latin Vulgate, 9,000 other early versions, giving us more than 24,000 manuscript copies of portions of the New Testament today. Taken from McDowell's Evidence That Demands a Verdict, Volume 1, page 1972, or 1972, page 40 to 48. The 1995 edition, page 57. Though we do not have any originals with such wealth of documentation at our disposal, which to compare we can delineate quite closely what those originals contained. No other ancient writing of antiquity has any MS or as many MS manuscripts as the New Testament. So here is an example of ancient literature and how the manuscripts go. Herodotus, date written 480 to 425 BC. Earliest copy 900 AD. Time span, it's over 1,300 years after, and we get 8 copies. I think maybe we got more, but we haven't got a lot more. Thucydides, we got date 460 to 400 BC. Earliest copy 900 AD. 1,300 years, question mark as to the copy. Let's just get the latest. Get the latest copy here for that. Earliest complete copy, we have fragments about 2nd century AD, but the earliest complete copy is 10th century, or around about 900 AD. Aristotle, philosopher, 384 to 322 BC. Earliest copy, 1,100 years. 1,100 AD. Time span, 1,400 years. We have 5 copies. I think these numbers 5 will be like a bit more, but not much more. Caesar's History, written 100 to 44 BC. Earliest copy, 900 AD. 1,000 years later, 10 copies. Like I said, more copies. Probably have more copies now. Pliny, 61 to 113 AD. Time span 150 AD. Earliest copy 150 AD. 750 years, 7 copies. Again, we have more copies. And then we go for Tacitus, Greek history, 100 AD. Earliest copy, full copy, 1,100 AD. 1,000 years, 20 copies. And I would say a bit more in each one of them in today, right? So now we go to, God bless you, folks. So now we go to, let's, all right. Madeleine, Matthew 26, 50 to 60 AD. That's a minority view. Most scholars put Matthew 26 to manuscript around about 100 AD to 200 AD. We have a small fragment of the Gospel of John, 90 AD, written. The manuscript's 130 AD, so it came 40 years after. The Bordemer Papyrus 2, 90 AD. One about copy is 150 to 200 AD, 60 to 110 years after. The Chesti Beatty Papyri, 1st century written, and the copy is 200 AD. That's 150 years. The Diatrasion, 1st century, 200 AD, first copy, and that's 150 years. And then we have Codex Vaticanus, 1st century, Codex Sinaiticus, and these copies are 325 to 350 AD, which is like 300 years after, etc. So the New Testament manuscripts are 5,300, 10,000 Latin Vulgate, 9,300 others, 24,000 copies. The manuscript portions of John's Gospel located in John's Ryland Library of Manchester, England, believed to be the oldest known fragment of the New Testament, dated 130, within 40 years of the original. The Lucan Papyrus, situated in the Library of Paris, has been dated to the 1st or early 2nd century, so predates the John Papyrus by 20-30 years. Time April 26, 1996, page 8. So what it's telling you is, it's not like Tacitus 1,000 years later or any other writer 1,000 years later. We're talking like 40 years, 100 years at most, we start getting manuscripts and full manuscripts, like in the 3rd century, which is like 250 years after, not 1,000 years after. Mark and Crewman. But of more important are the manuscript findings of Mark and Matthew. New research, which has now been uncovered by Dr. Thies, is published in his newly released book on the subject. Jesus Papyri mentions a fragment of the book of Mark found among the Qumran scrolls, fragment 7Q5, showing that was written sometime before 68 AD. It's important to remember that Christ died in 33 AD, so this manuscript could have been written at least within 35 years of his death, possibly earlier. I'll just put this in AI and we'll just get clarification on it. I think most scholars would disagree with that, but I agree with it. I think it's fair comment, but many scholars will disagree. Yeah, his view is contested by most scholars today, but I think if you go and look at, let's look at fragment. Let's look at the fragment. See what it says. So there are scholars like Spanish papyrologist Jesuit Jose O'Callaghan believed it was of the New Testament, some part of the New Testament. So yeah, yeah, I've just looked at the parchment. Let me just give you, put this in chat. This is looking at the fragments. What I'm looking at. Put it in chat there. That's private chat. And if anybody wants this article, I'll put it in private chat. So we're doing a bit of scholarship here today. So if you go private chat, you can look at the sources. But it looks like there are a number of eminent scholars who would agree with Thiessen that 7Q5 goes back, is about Mark, even though it's a minority view. So we'll go with this. Sam Simon says, the most significant find, however, is a manuscript fragment in the book of Matthew, chapter 26, called the Magdalene Manuscripts, which has been analysed by Dr. Carsten Thiede and also written up in his book, The Jesus Papyrus, using a sophisticated analysis of the handwriting of the fragment by employing a special state-of-the-art microscope. It differentiated between 20 separate micro layers of the papyrus, measuring the height and depth of the ink as well as the angle of the stylus used by the scribe. After this analysis, Thiede was able to compare it with papyri from that period, notably manuscripts found at Qumran dated 58 AD, another at Herculaneum dated prior 79 AD, and a further one from the fortress Masada dated between 73 and 74 AD. And finally, papyrus from the Egyptian town of Oxyrhynchus. The Magdalene manuscript fragment matches all four. In fact, it's almost a twin to the papyrus found in Oxyrhynchus, which bears the date of 65 to 66 AD. Thiede concludes that these papyrus fragments of St. Matthew's Gospel were written no later than this date and probably earlier. That suggests that we either have a portion of the original Gospel of Matthew or an immediate copy which was written while Matthew and other disciples and eyewitnesses to the events were still alive. This will be the oldest manuscript portion of our Bible in existence today, one which coexists with the original writers. And I would say that is the case. I mean, I believe in the scholarship of this guy, Carsten Thiede. He's dead now, but his scholarship was immense. But it is a minority view. But that's because of politics, not because of the facts. José O'Callaghan, a Spanish Jesuit paleographer, made headlines around the world in March 1972, when he identified a manuscript fragment from Qumran, a piece of the Gospel of Mark. The piece was from cave. 7 fragments from this cave had previously been dated between 50 to 50 AD, hardly within the time frame established for the New Testament writings. Using accepted methods of papyrology and paleography, O'Callaghan compared the sequence of letters with the existing documents and eventually identified 9 fragments as belonging to one Gospel, Acts, and a few epistles. Some of these are dated slightly later than 50, but still early. So these are the dates. So these are early fragments that scholars contest, but they're in the 50 AD range, 70 AD range. Both friends and critics acknowledge that if O'Callaghan's conclusions will revolutionize New Testament theories, even if some of these fragments are from the New Testament, the implications for Christian apologetics are enormous. Mark and Acts must have been written within the lifetime of the apostles and contemporaries of the events. There will be no time for mythological embellishments of the records. So let's continue. That's a bit complex scholarship there, but you can go and look into that. Of the 4 Gospels alone, there are 19,368 citations by the Church Fathers from the late 1st century on. This includes 268 quotes by Justin Martyr, who was 100 to 165 AD, 1,038 quotes by Irenaeus, active in the late 2nd century, 1017 by Clement of Alexandria, 155 to 220. 9231 by Origen. He was around in 185 to 254. 3822 by Tertullian. He was around 160 to 220. 734 by Hippolytus. He was around in 236. 3258 by Eusebius. He was around 265, 339. And you can go on with quotations going on of Shepherd of Hermes, Didache, Polycarp, Papias. This is in Norman Geisler's Encyclopedia, page 529 to 530. So just in the quotations alone, it verifies the New Testament, that the New Testament was early in the 1st century with all those quotations. Some critics have tried to debunk the New Testament documents due to the variant readings that exist between the MS. Geisler responds, there is a wide misunderstanding among critics about errors in biblical manuscripts. Some have estimated that about 200,000 of them. First of all, these are not errors but variant readings, the vast majority of which are strictly grammatical. Second, these readings are spread throughout more than 5,300 manuscripts, so that the variant spelling of one letter in one verse is 2,000 manuscripts is counted as 2,000 errors. Textual scholars Westcott and Hall estimated that only 1 in 60 of these variants have significance. I don't respect Westcott and Hall, but that's on our side, that's good. This would leave at least 98.33% pure. Philip Chaff calculated that of the 150,000 variants known in his day, only 4,000 changed the meaning of the passage. Only 50 were of real significance, and not even one affected an article of faith or precept of duty, which is not abundantly sustained by other and undoubted passages or by the whole tenet of Scripture itself. Philip Chaff, page 177. So if you look at all the manuscripts and all the textual variants, it's not a major problem at all, you know. Geisler's Encyclopedia, page 532, 533. Most other ancient books are not so well authenticated. New Testament scholar Bruce Metzer estimated that the Mahabharata of Hinduism is copied with only about 90% accuracy, and Homer's Iliad with about 95%. By comparison, he estimated the New Testament is about 99.5% accurate in the copying. Well, that is pretty amazing, really, to be honest. B.F. Westcott and F.J. Hort, who I'm not too great fans of, but will read, the editors of the New Testament in Origen's original Greek, commented, if comparative trivialities such as change of order, the insertion or omission of the article with proper names, and the like are set aside, the works, in our opinion, will subject to doubt can hardly amount to more than 1,000th part of the Old New Testament. Sir Frederick Kenyon states, no unbiased scholar would deny that the text that has come down to us is substantially sound. Kenyon, the Bible, in McDowell's Evidence, page 49. Kenyon rightly concludes it cannot be too strongly asserted that in the substance of the text of the Bible is certain, especially in this case with the New Testament. Sir Frederick J. Kenyon, Our Bible and the Ancient Manuscripts, cited in McDowell's Evidence, is page 45. F.F. Bruce says the evidence of our New Testament writings is ever so greater than the evidence of many writings of classical author, and the authenticity of which no one dreams of questioning. And if the New Testament were a collection of secular writings, their authenticity would generally be regarded as beyond doubt. F.F. Bruce, The New Testament Documents, Are They Reliable? IVP Press, page 1998, page 15. Yeah, I'm not being funny, guys, but we're focusing on the New Testament and its historicity. We're not focusing on high church, low church, Eastern Orthodoxy, whatever. We're focusing on the New Testament historicity, and this is taking away attention from what we're doing. If it continues, I'll just have to wipe the comments off because it's distracting from what we're doing. We're doing New Testament documents. We're doing the historicity of the New Testament. So we need to focus on what we're doing. In fact, I'm going to take the comments off. I'm going to delete the comments on Anglicanism and all those because it's distracting from what we're trying to do. We need to keep to the topics in hand, what we're doing. Archaeology and the New Testament. Independent archaeological research has solidified the authenticity and the historical reliability of the New Testament. Some of the discoveries include Luke refers to Lysania as being the tetrarch of Albany, the beginning of John the Baptist's ministry, in AD 27 AD, in Luke chapter 3, verse 1. Historians accuse Luke of being in error, noting that only Lysanias known was the one killed in 36 BC. Now, however, an inscription found near Damascus refers to the freedman of Lysanias, the tetrarch, and is dated from 14 to 29 AD. So Luke has been shown to be right and accurate. Paul, writing to Romans, speaks of the city treasurer Erastus, Romans 16:23. And in 1929, excavation in Corinth unearthed a pavement inscribed these words: Erastus, curator of public buildings, laid this pavement at his own expense, confirming the archaeology of the book of Romans. Luke mentions a riot in the city of Ephesus which took place in a theatre, Acts chapter 19, verse 23 to 41. The theatre has now been excavated and has a seating capacity of 25,000. In Acts chapter 21, an incident which broke out between Paul and certain Jews from Asia, these Jews accused Paul of defiling the temple by allowing Trophimus, a Gentile, to enter in. In 1871, Greek inscription were found, now housed in Istanbul, which read, "No foreigner may enter within the barricade which surrounds the temple and enclosure. Anyone who is caught doing so will have himself to thank for his ensuing death." Luke addresses Gallio in the title proconsul in Acts 18:12. A Delphi inscription verifies this when it states, "As Lucius Junio Gallio, my friend, and the proconsul of Achaia." Luke calls Publicus, the chief man of Malta, the first man of the island, Acts 28:7. An inscription now found to confirm Publicus as the first man. In John McDowell, the best of John McDowell already defends page 110 to 11. Archaeologists have unearthed Jacob's well at Sychar, John 4:5. An inscription found in Caesarea confirms Pilate's role as prefect of Judea during the time of Christ. A discovery bone box of crucified man named Johann from the 1st century Palestine confirms the fact that nails were used to pierce the ankles of the victim. Such was the case of Christ, of course, and this discovery is significant in answering the skeptics who believed that the Romans used only ropes to tie the victim's legs to the cross. So now we're looking at Luke the Great Historian. Luke the Great Historian. Dr. Ramsey stated, Luke is a historian of the first rank. Not merely are his statements of fact or trustworthy, this author should be placed among with the greatest of historians. Ramsey further said, Luke is unsurpassed in respects of his trustworthiness. John McDowell, The Best of Josh McDowell, page 108 to 109. Other skeptics. Nelson Gluck. It may be stated categorically that no archaeological discovery has ever controverted a biblical reference, and that almost incredible accurate historical memory of the Bible, particularly so when it is fortified by archaeological fact. Josh McDowell, Evidence Demands a Verdict, page 65. I listened to him when he was at Temple Emmanuel in Dallas. He got rather red in the face and said, I've been accused of teaching the verbal plenary inspiration of the scripture. I want to be understood that I've never taught this. All I have ever said is that all my archaeological investigation, I have never found one artifact of antiquity that contradicts any statement of the Word of God. Another skeptic was Dr. Clifford Wilson, who, due to the discoveries made, concluded that it is the studied conviction of this writer that the Bible is the ancient world's most reliable history textbook. Wilson, on Rocks and Biblical Reliability, page 126. Dr. Wilson, like Ramsey, goes on to hail Luke for his accuracy. Luke demonstrated, said Dr. Wilson, a remarkably accurate knowledge of geographical and political ideas. He referred correctly to provinces that were established at this time, as indicated in Acts 15:6. He demonstrated a clear knowledge of local customs, such as those related to the speech of the Lycaonians in Acts 14:11. Some aspects relating to the foreign woman who was converted at Athens in Acts 17:34, and he even knew that the city of Ephesus was known as the temple keeper of Artemis in Acts 19:35. He refers to different local officers by their exact titles: the proconsul deputy of Cyprus in Acts 13:7, the magistrates of Philippi, Acts 16:20-35, the politarchs, another word for magistrates at Thessalonica, Acts 17:6, the proconsul of Achaia in Acts 18:12, and the treasurer of Corinth, Adel, which was the title of the man known as Erastus at Corinth in Acts 19:22, Romans 16:23. So all these are examples of Dr. Wilson, skeptic, who's saying that Luke was really, really accurate. Wilson's statement again, those who know the facts now recognize the New Testament must be accepted as a remarkably accurate source book, page 120. Leading New Testament archaeologist McRae was interviewed by atheist turned Christian Lee Strobel regarding the archaeological evidence of the New Testament. After dealing with the evidence of Luke's accuracy, Strobel asked McRae about the evidence supporting John's Gospel. Archaeology may support the credibility of Luke, but he isn't the only author of the New Testament. I wonder what scientists would have to say about John, whose Gospel was sometimes considered suspect because he talked about locations that couldn't be verified. Some scholars charge that since he failed to get these basic details straight, John must not have been close to the events of Jesus' life. That conclusion has been turned upside down in recent years. There have been several discoveries that have shown John to be very accurate. McRae pointed out, for example, in John 5:1-15, records how Jesus healed an invalid by the pool of Bethesda. John provides the detail that the pool had 5 porticos. For a long time, people cited this as an example of John being inaccurate because no such place had been found. but more recently the Pool of Bethesda has been excavated. It lies maybe 40 feet below ground, and sure enough, there were 5 porticos, which means colonnade, porches, or walkways, exactly as John described. And you have other discoveries, the Pool of Siloam of John 9:7, Jacob's Well in John 4:12, the probable location of stone pavement near Jaffa Gate, where Jesus appeared before Pilate, even Pilate's own identity, all of which have lent historical reliability to John's Gospel. So let's just recap a little bit of where we've got to here, and then we'll come back to this in a minute. But let's just go back. We looked at manuscript evidence of ancient copies of like Herodotus and things like that. An average of 1,000 years, we get a copy, and we saw that we get copies, like full copies, within 300 years. But we have even little scraps, even going to 50 AD. These are, many scholars do not agree with this, but there is evidence to show that that is the case. We looked at archaeology, and we looked at how archaeology confirmed Paul, confirmed Luke. We looked at the church fathers' quotations. We looked at Luke's accuracy, etc. So we covered a lot of ground here. Hi, Lewis. God bless you, brother. So I know this is a deep. If you don't want deep, you can go to the Bible study I just did on persecution. That's like more easy study. This is a bit more deeper. It's a bit more scholarly. So we've seen the accuracy of Luke. We see the accuracy of John. It's like showing you how the New Testament is reliable. So internal evidence. Eyewitnesses. Luke chapter 1, verse 1 to 4. Many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the first eyewitnesses and servants of the word. Therefore, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, it seemed good also to me to write an orderly account, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the certainty of the things you have been taught. Luke chapter 1, 1 to 4. Luke was definitely in a place to visit Galilee to investigate people, by the way. He was definitely in a place to go to Jerusalem, which he did visit to investigate people. He knew Peter, he knew Paul, he had access to all the eyewitness material. So it shows you that the Gospel of Luke is based on eyewitness material. So Luke knew Paul. So if you notice here in Acts chapter 21, verse 20, it says, and we had torn ourselves away from them. We put out to sea. We sailed to, we landed, we left, we continued. The we passages show that he was following Paul. So he knew all that Paul knew. He also met Peter. And he also knew Mark. Acts 12:12. When this had dawned on him, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, also called Mark. So he knew other disciples. Yeah, he was able to get information about Jesus. So the New Testament was based on eyewitnesses. 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 16 to 18. We did not follow cleverly invented stories when we told you about the power and coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, but we were eyewitnesses of his majesty, for he received honor and glory. So they were eyewitnesses. The apostles were eyewitnesses to Jesus. 1 John chapter 1, 1 to 4. It says, that which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked on at our hands and touched. They saw Jesus. They verified it. It was based on eyewitnesses. So they were eyewitnesses of Jesus' arrest. Matthew 26, 47, 56. They were eyewitnesses present at Jesus' trial. John 18, 15, 28. They were eyewitnesses at the cross. Mark chapter 15, verse 40 to 41. They were eyewitnesses to his burial. John 19, 38, 42. There were eyewitnesses. There were eyewitnesses who saw the empty tomb. Matthew 28, verse 11 to 15. There were eyewitnesses who testified they had seen Jesus alive from the dead and who were willing to die for that claim. Luke chapter 24, verse 36 to 46. Acts chapter 1, verse 1 to 5. So what about the dating of the Gospels? The Gospels furnish evidence that attests to the fact that some of the books were definitely written before 70 AD. Mark, the Gospel of Mark mentioned the high priest among priests without naming him. Mark 14, verse 60 to 63. According to other writers, the high priest at the time of Jesus' public ministry was Caiaphas. Matthew 26, 57. Caiaphas was a high priest from AD 18 to 37. This presumes that Mark's audience would have automatically known to which high priest he was alluding to, affirming that the tradition underlying this gospel is very early, possibly no later than AD 40. That's a brilliant piece of argumentation there. That is absolutely brilliant. So basically, Mark didn't mention who the high priest was because those who were reading would have known who he was. Absolutely brilliant. 540 AD date because of that. Mark also mentions Alexander and Rufus and presumes that his audience would know who the gentlemen were. A certain man from Cyrene, Simon, the father of Alexander and Rufus, was passing by on his way in from the country, and they forced him to carry the cross. Mark 15:21. Church tradition indicates that Mark composed the gospel in Rome. Interestingly, Paul, in his letter to the Romans, dated approximately AD 57, mentions a person named Rufus. Great Rufus, chosen in the Lord, and his mother, who was Greet Rufus, chosen in the Lord, and his mother, who has been mother to me too, Romans 16:13. So the date for Luke. The consensus of New Testament scholarship agree that Luke and Acts were authored by the same person. A great portion of the book of Acts centers on Jerusalem, the temple, and Paul's conversion and his missionary activities. The author also mentions the death of Stephen in Acts chapter 7, verse 51, and Acts chapter 8, verse 1, and James, the brother of John, Acts 12:2. Interestingly, the author does not mention the death of James, the brother of the Lord, AD 62, and Peter, AD 65 to 68, and he doesn't mention the death of Paul, AD 67-68. Also does not mention the burning of Rome and the persecution of the Christians, AD 64, or the destruction of the temple, AD 70, but ends at Paul's imprisonment about AD 63. It seems rather strange that the author would close to omit such information had he been writing after these events had already taken place. This seems to strongly support the fact that the book must have been written no later than AD 63. The fact the Apostle Paul actually quotes the Gospel of Luke, for the scripture says, "Do not muzzle the ox while it's treading out the grain, and the worker deserves its wages." Paul quotes Deuteronomy 25:4, and the second quote is from Luke 10, verse 7. Paul quotes Luke and places it on the same level of the authority of Moses' writings. The consensus of scholars agree that Luke was the last of the synoptic gospels to be written, implying that all three were in circulation at the time of Paul's writing, which some scholars date approximately 61 to 65 AD. This argues the fact that Luke must have been written between 55 to 60 AD, with Acts shortly following. So the Gospel of John provides several lines of evidence supporting early dating. In John 5:2, now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. John doesn't say that there was a pool, but that there is. This suggests that John's Gospel was written before the destruction of the temple. So I think that's enough evidence. I mean, we can go into a lot more evidence there. So excuse me. Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew gives us some hints that it is an eyewitness document. One such hint comes from Matthew 27:3-8. That is why it has been called the field of the blood to this day. Matthew 27:3-8. The fact that the field was still known to Matthew's readers presumed that Matthew was writing to eyewitnesses who could have gone to this site themselves and personally verified whether such a place existed. So all the Gospels really were written prior to 70 AD, basically. Some scholars would disagree with that, or many would, but this is the evidence that's being presented here, and I agree with it. And then you can go into Paul's letters and so all the evidence then for the crucifixion and the burial and the resurrection of Christ. Told you it'd be a scholarly video, this. The oldest traditions attest to Jesus was buried 1 Corinthians 15:4, a tradition underlying Mark. John A.T. Robinson, himself a liberal, admits that the burial of Jesus is one of the best attested facts on the historical Jesus. In refutation of those who denied the entombment of Jesus, Robinson stated that the burial of Jesus is one of the earliest and best attested facts about Jesus, the human face of God, page 1973, page 131. On the first Easter Sunday, a group of women found the tomb of Jesus empty. There are a number of reasons why most scholars accept this as a fact. The empty tomb story is found in the oldest Christian traditions, such as Paul, 1 Corinthians 15:3-5. The discovery of the empty tomb lacks any legendary embellishment. The Gospels do not record how Christ rose from the dead, but simply state that the tomb was found empty. Jacob Kremer, an Austrian specialist in the resurrection, stated that by far most scholars hold firmly to the reliability of the biblical statement concerning the empty tomb. But notice, why would you choose women to be the first to have seen the resurrection? Because women were only worth 2 women to 1 man in court. 3. On multiple occasions and under different circumstances, various individuals and groups experience appearance of Jesus being alive after his death. 3 specific reasons universally accepted by New Testament scholars supports the fact that these appearances did occur. The list of eyewitnesses of Jesus post-resurrection appearances, as quoted by Paul, guarantees that appearances occurred, 1 Corinthians 15:5-7. This is based on the fact that the great majority of these witnesses, nearly 500, were still alive when Paul wrote. The gospel tradition provides multiple independent attestation for the appearances of Christ. Researchers have discovered certain signs of historical credibility in specific appearances. The unexpected activity of the disciples fishing prior to Jesus' appearance by the Lake of Tiberias, and the conversion of James and Paul, who were skeptics. The late Norman Perrin, a former New Testament scholar at the University of Chicago, summed up the view of the consensus of New Testament scholarship. The more we study the tradition with regard to the appearances, the firmer the rock begins to appear upon which they are based. Fact 4, the followers believe that Jesus had been raised from the dead, despite the fact they had no reason to believe this. Excuse me. And then what the church thought of the books, the New Testament. Origin, 225 AD. In addition, for the proof of our testament, we take the testimonies from which is called the Old Testament and that which is called the New, which we believe to be divine writings. You have non-Christian sources. Thallus, AD 50, 75, says there was a darkness in the time of Jesus. Pliny the Younger talks about Christians worshipping Jesus as God. Lucian of Samosata saying that people worshipped a crucified Savior. Cornelia Tacitus talks about Christ dying under Pontius Pilate. Josephus died under Pontius Pilate. So there's a lot of historical information there. I mean, this has been rather deep. Sometimes we have to go a little bit deep. So this is the article. You can, I'll put it in, put it there, and it's in private chat, the article as well. So, I'm coming, guys. I'm just so if you go on YouTube now, on YouTube page, I'm now gonna just post some information there about what we've done. So it's going to go now on YouTube post, and I'm just going to go there now and so I'm just going on and then there's a link of 2 articles so I just post an outline of what we've just done on the YouTube post. You can have a look at that. That gives you a kind of brief outline of what we've done, and also some links to to the sources and everything. So I hope that's a help. Rather scholarly, I know. So there we are. So yeah, so if you go on the YouTube page of post, I've just posted a little article there with a brief outline of what we've done with the Sam Shimon articles there. So yeah. Yeah, it's strange because Philo actually confirms a lot of things, so Philo's actually helpful for Christianity, really. So yeah. Okay, I'm gonna be doing more posts tonight. This is I've done 2. I've done a study on persecution. We've done a very scholarly study of New Testament documents and the historicity of the resurrection. Some parts of it were quite scholarly. So I'm going to continue. I've got some more things to do. We're going to do a study of Galatians now. So yeah, so I'll come back in a minute. We're going to be doing Galatians. God bless you. God bless you, Han. God bless you, Gareth. God bless everybody else. God bless you all.